Steve, let's drill down into this a little bit.
Sure.
Who's affected by this program? Just some more information.
Well, let me mention three elements. First of all, the Attorney General is bringing the lawsuit on behalf of local governments and state government units within Indiana. He's bringing the suit against the three major manufacturers and marketers of ductile iron pipe fittings. That's McWane, Star Pipe, and Sigma Corporation. These entities control the vast majority of the market. Several years ago, they all worked together and colluded to raise prices or keep prices higher than they should have been. So Indiana communities that had these projects paid more money than they should
So
have.
this would be water and wastewater projects.
That's right. That's right.
What time period are we talking about?
Well, we're actually the pricing occurred between January of 2008 and about January of 2012. That's a good question because sometimes, like if there was a state revolving loan fund that was approved in the latter part of 2007, those dollars may not have actually been spent on DIPF until into 2008. So those purchases would qualify. The same if there was a state revolving loan fund approved in January of 2012. The expenditure may not have actually occurred until after that. But if the pricing that the contractor used for his DIPF came 2012 or earlier, then that would qualify. The other thing we know is that many of these documents may not be held by the local unit of government. They may actually be with the contractor.
Right.
So people are going to have to work with their engineer and with their contractor. Some of these items then were not bought directly from the three defendants, but they were bought from suppliers, including some of these suppliers buy from subsidiaries of the three manufacturers. So one thing that a unit of government has to do, they can't just look at their vendor list and say, well, we didn't buy anything from those three companies, because there's a good chance that they didn't. There's a good chance that they did the contract and then the contractor made the purchase.
Right.
And the contractor may have actually made the purchase with a supplier as opposed to from the manufacturer. So there's a little bit of a paper trail that we have to work back through.
So this is not just cities and towns, but this would also include other units of government and utility-based, municipally owned
That's right.
corporate or companies.
That's right. It would include if a city owns a utility, which we have that. We have variations. Sometimes we actually have not-for-profit corporations set up by governmental units in Indiana. That may be it could be a regional utility. I know there are many different forms. Ultimately, what counts is whether it's an entity that is controlled by a governmental unit.
So ideally, the information you're seeking is actual bills of sale that would have specific information to ductile iron pipe fittings and a time period that fits within the time period that the antitrust lawsuit covers.
That's right. The time period is for the pricing of that product. That's when these manufacturers engaged in activity that kept the prices higher than they should have been.
And that was January of 2008 through
January of 2012. Any pricing of the DIPF that occurred within that time period, we are arguing in the case that was too high. People paid a higher price. And when you think about it, the Attorney General is bringing an action on behalf of what we call indirect purchasers. The city or the town or the regional utility probably didn't buy it directly from these defendants. They bought it from somebody else, or they essentially paid a contractor for the product, and the contractor bought it from somebody else. So every time there was another step, the manufacturer sold it to their subsidiary, who sold it to their suppliers, or suppliers, distributors, who then sold it to a contractor. Every time there's some degree of markup. So by the time you get to the end of the line, the user in our community paid quite a bit more for the product than they should have. And that's what we're trying to recapture.
I had a question, that is, what if a municipality or utility stockpile this material? It's not actually in the ground, but it's stockpiled in a pipe yard.
Right, right.
Is that,
Right. Yeah, the key thing is whether there was a purchase made within when the pricing occurred during that 4-year period from January of 2008 to January of 2012. Was there a purchase made of DIPF? It really doesn't matter. We often talk about these being in projects, but if it was just kept for inventory, if it's a project that hasn't been completed yet but will be, but the purchase already occurred and they've got it, that qualifies too.
I think we have a link to a form that you put together that'll help organize the information that you need to have.
Yeah, there are two key. Right away, we need information on the contact and a little bit about the project, the time period, the location of the project, or if it was for general repairs and maintenance, that's fine.
Okay.
So we ask for a little bit of information, but the key is contact, and if there are others involved in that matter, again, if it was a specific project and there's a contractor or an engineer that did work on that, we need that right away.
Okay.
So
When you
we've
say
got
right
basis.
away,
Well,
in
we'd
the
like to
next
have it
couple weeks?
in the next, we'd like to have as much as we can this week, and what we
Okay.
can't get in this week, the next couple of weeks. Following that, we'll be getting back with those each of those contacts and working through the document trail and ultimately finding documents, that's the key to making the case, that show that the DIPF was actually purchased. Now, that may be a combination of showing that there were specs put out, maybe created by the engineer, and then the contractor complied with the specs and said, yeah, I'm going to give you DIPF in this project. And then we link back to, okay, when were public monies paid to the contractor, when the contractor then paid the supplier for the DIPF. So we can show that, yeah, it ultimately came from the product came from one of these three companies on the one end, and there were public dollars used on the other ends to buy
well,
that.
I'm sure more questions are going to come up through this process. And
Well, one, I want to jump in. I'm an attorney, but I do want to mention that there are no attorney costs to the claimants in this case. So what they've got to do is spend some time working on producing some of the records, and I understand that will take a little bit of time. But if we can get that in over the next few weeks, I think at the end of the day, if we're successful, and again, there's no guarantees with litigation, but we're spending our time on it because we think it will be successful. At the end of the day, I think people will look back and see that the recovery was well worth the time they spent.
do we
Right
have
now,
any
right.
idea of what kind of recovery could be expected as a percentage of cost?
We really don't, because it depends on a wastewater or a water project. That percentage is going to be higher. There's more DIPF used. On a local building project, a library, a community hospital. There's I'm thinking where there's pipe used, there's often fittings used, and this covers the fittings that obviously around hydrants, where there's meters, where there's directional changes that can modify how the water flows.
Well, and the cost of
gonna
those
have-
fittings is
Yeah, this
much
is
higher than the cost of the pipe.
Right. These are the expensive items.
Right.
So again, it's going to depend on the size of the project, but key targets are going to be wastewater projects and community water projects. And we know not every city in town has done these over the past few years, but we know many have, and sometimes in our smaller communities as a local challenge for financing. Seldom, we had storms last night, and some communities are going to bear costs that they hadn't anticipated.
Right.
This is a chance for people to recover some revenue that they hadn't anticipated.
It's great opportunity. I'm sure, like I said, more questions are going to come up as we go through this, and we'll do our best to keep information available on our website and certainly linking back to you.
Yeah, I can be contacted either by email or by phone. My email is stevecarter 219@yahoo.com, or my phone number is 317-997-7987. And I know Commonwealth is going to have additional information available too.
And we'll have that contact information as well below the website here. So
Great.
we'll get her done.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.